Hello, my name is Jerry Hensler, and I want to thank you first off for purchasing this tape from me, and hopefully you'll get your money's worth, and this will help you get started in Benchrest shooting. As you can see, I won a couple of trophies. I've been in Benchrest about 8 years, and I've dealt with a lot of new shooters in the past, so decided to make this tape to give you a reference to help you get started and hopefully shoot smaller groups, smaller aggregates. This tape is not designed for the Benchrest shooter that's had more than a couple of years of experience. It's for the beginner. We're going to cover the different classes of rifles, how to break in a barrel, how to clean it, how to tune the gun up, the use of wind flags and reading some conditions, and how to set up your rest and things like that. A lot of the common questions that beginners have that struggle along for a while and don't know where to get the right information. These methods are pretty solid, pretty well accepted by most Benchrest shooters. So we're going to talk about the classes of the guns, and first off, there's the hunter class. Basically, it's a 10-pound rifle with a 6-power scope. The cartridge has to hold more than as much as or more than a .30-30. The bore size of the barrel must be 6mm or larger. And you shoot it on bullseyes. In other words, one shot for each bullseye. And then the other types of guns we shoot for groups, and we'll go into those now. Okay, the first class we'll talk about is the unrestricted rifle. Basically, that rifle can be set up in almost any configuration. It virtually has no rules. This one happens to ride on rails, and you can see that it doesn't have a gun stock per se. It has mechanical adjustments to make it aim up and down and left and right. And that gun is seldom used in Benchrest other than for that particular class. It's not legal for any other class other than the unlimited class. But it could be any caliber, any scope, basically any configuration of the rests. You could shoot one in a stock that's real heavy. There's no weight restrictions on it. Okay, the next class is the heavy varmint. The heavy varmint has a 13.5-pound weight limit. You do have to shoot it off of sandbags, and you can shoot any caliber, any scope. The action can be glued into the stock or just bedded, whichever you prefer. But the stock can't be any wider than 3 inches. Now, this particular gun is in a 6mm Remington BR, shortened up a little bit. But it weighs 13.5 pounds. But if I want to shoot it in sporter, there's the butt stock here, and I've got a 3-pound weight that comes out of the back end. Now the rifle becomes what we call a sporter class. And it weighs 10.5 pounds. And that's the only difference basically between it and a heavy varmint. I have another barrel. This barrel here is chambered in a 22 BR. And by unscrewing this barrel and putting this barrel on, I now have a light varmint. I might mention that a sporter gun is legal in the sporter class, the light varmint class, the heavy varmint class, and the unrestricted class. A light varmint would be legal in light varmint, heavy varmint, and unrestricted, but not sporter. The light varmint and sporter, the only difference basically being the size of the bullet. A sporter has to be 23 caliber or above. A heavy varmint can only be shot in the unlimited or the heavy varmint class. You need to get a copy of the rule book for either the IBS or the MVRSA and read up on the differences between the various classes. If you're just starting out, you can only have one gun, and you want to compete in the registered shoots, by all means put yourself together or get a hold of a sporter gun which will allow you to shoot in any of the 4 group gun classes. The hunter class can be shot in a group class, but you wouldn't be competitive at all. You wouldn't have a chance. So I don't recommend just building a hunter-only gun. Build a sporter. You can shoot in any of the classes. Some clubs have varmint for score, so you can shoot that alongside the hunter class guys. You'll have to check with your local club. If you're not going to be competing in the registered shoots, then I recommend you build a heavy varmint gun. That's the 13.5-pound gun. Build it in a 22 bore size. The reason being that the less the gun recoils, the easier it'll be for you to learn how to shoot it accurately. The heavier the gun, the less it kicks, the easier time you'll have while you're trying to learn to shoot good groups with it. But I recommend you stay away from multiple guns, multiple barrels, things of this nature, because it'll be too hard for you as a beginner to keep up with all of them. And you do have to know the gun that you're shooting extremely well in order to be successful. One thing I want to mention, we're fixing to go to Dietz Range in New Braunfels, Texas. It's one of the tougher ranges to shoot Benchrest on. But keep in mind there's a lot of variables going on here, so you're on your own as far as safe practices and things of that nature concerning loads and stuff like that. Just too much for me to go into here, and be careful. Okay, on your rest, I have a number of recommendations to keep you out of trouble to start with and kind of get you to start off on the right foot. Make sure that the front bag is a relatively thick one, about an inch or so on the bottom half. Stay away from the real thin bags. Also, any other unusual type of front rest, I do not recommend you experiment that area until you have a fair amount of experience under your belt. Stay with a conventional, thick-bottomed front bag. And later on, after you get a few years' experience and have a lot of confidence in your ability, then you can experiment with the other types of bags. Also, I recommend you stay away from windage adjustments like this rest has. Keep everything simple starting out. You don't need bells and whistles. It'll just get you in trouble. This particular rest happens to be a Hart. It's heavy. I don't like the aluminum ones to start out with. Usually a person only buys one rest, and I think you're better off with the heavier rest to begin with, not the newer aluminum types. Make sure you get one with some weight in it. This rest also has some little aluminum pads. Let me get one, I'll show you. It's nothing more than a little plate of metal. Has a little hole in the center of it. It's got some carpet tape on the bottom. A lot of these bench tops are so rough and beat up that it's hard to get a grip on them. Points on your rest always get dull, so you just set these down on top of the bench and set your rest points in there, and it keeps the rest still. Otherwise, you got to resort to keeping your points tight and beating on them with a hammer all the time. It just tears up the benches and generally annoys everyone anyhow. The rear bags, I like the one with the thick bottom on it. Keeps it a little more stable on the bench. The amount of sand you need to put in these bags is kind of critical. I like the front bag to be fairly tight, but keep in mind you've got to be able to squeeze it some. You don't want it so hard that you can't deform it a little. particularly with the lighter weight guns, you'll notice they have problems when you get those bags too hard. It's hard to get them too hard, but it can happen. The rear bag, I like to keep a lot of sand in the bottom. Keep it fairly hard, fairly solid. The ears, though, I like to have kind of loose. If you get them too tight, the gun has a tendency to bounce in the bag, the ears, so don't get them real hard. Keep the bottom half of the bag hard, but the ears kind of medium. Again, keep in mind you've got to be able to squeeze any sandbag at least 1/4 of an inch in with your finger or your thumb. That's in the rule book, so don't get it too hard. Another thing is, make sure your sandbags are filled with sand, not lead shot, not gravel, just plain old ordinary sand. You can try some foundry sand if you can find it, but I think the ordinary sand, play sand or beach sand, works just fine. This here bag is what I use to rest my trigger finger on, so to speak. This steadies the right hand. I happen to be a right-handed shooter, and it steadies it, and this hand is touching the rifle while that rifle is firing. So I feel it's essential to have something as close to the rifle as you can to hold this steady so that you're not disturbing that gun while it's in the firing sequence. From the moment you start squeezing up on that trigger until that bullet gets out of the barrel is very, very important, particularly when you start shooting really small groups at long distances. This last little bag I've got is just a little flat leather bag with some sand in it to keep it from blowing away. And I rest my elbow on that so my elbow doesn't get torn up on the concrete. A lot of these benches are smooth, a lot of the benches are rough. You never know what you're going to run into. While I'm covering rest, I'm going to go over some more things. This here is a plain old towel. You say, well, what do you need a towel for? Well, I lay my ammo on it. I set things on it. I don't want things to get dirty. I don't want them to roll off the bench. Sometimes if it's raining, you got to wipe the gun off or something like that. It's just a general ordinary house towel. Nothing in particular. This here is plain old baby powder in here. And all you do is dope up the bag so that the gun will slide freely. If you happen to be shooting in real humid conditions all the time or a lot of rainy conditions, you might want to try motor mica. This stuff picks up moisture pretty easy. If you're going to shoot in damp conditions and you're using baby powder, it's going to cake up on you, so you're going to have to constantly reapply it. The important thing is that the gun slides smoothly, not jerky. Don't get if you have one of these types of rests that you can adjust the side tension, don't get it too tight. You should be able to feel just a slight amount of movement in that gun sideways through there. This here is plain old water. I don't drink it because it's kind of stale. But the rear bag on some benches has a tendency to slide around. Some of the benches are coated with paint or epoxy. Makes them really slick. So what I do in that case is I put a little water on the bottom of the bag. Rub it into the leather. Set it on the bench. It has a tendency to keep the bag from wandering around on the bench for you. Before you get any ideas about using some stickum or glue or something like that, it's against the rules. It's not specifically spelled out, at least I don't know. I haven't looked at the rule book lately. But an attachment to the rear bag is generally a no-no. It's kind of your own conscientious effort, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I've checked with several directors, and no one's ever objected to putting water on a sandbag. that pretty well covers the rest. You say I can't overemphasize the importance of getting your rests right, particularly if you're shooting a 10 or 10.5 pound rifle. The heavier rifle tends to not show up rest problems, but a 10-pound rifle or 10.5 pound rifle, particularly in the larger bore size of 6mm rather than a 22, tends to amplify any problems you have with your rest. You should be able to slide the gun back and forth freely, smoothly, and not have the gun wander around all over the place. Now, how much is wandering around all over the place? Well, it should track reasonably well across the target. In other words, from high to low, or as it slides back and forth, it shouldn't be wandering, over here, back and forth, up and down, and then over here, back and forth, up and down. If it's doing that, you probably don't have enough sand in your rear ears, or your side tension is not tight enough. If the gun is, when it's firing, feels bouncy to you, then you've probably got too much side tension, too much sand in the ears. It's hard to get too much sand in the rear bag on the bottom, so don't worry about that. Make sure that it's legal, meaning it can compress a little bit, and the same with the front bag. Depending on the stock design that you shoot and the weight configuration of your rifle, the center of gravity, you may have to adjust the front and the rear bag, how hard it is or how full it is, according to the way that rifle shoots best with. But that's getting into an area that I'll cover in my next tape. Just keep in mind you want the bags to be reasonably firm but not too hard.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking about wind flags at this part. And here is our first wind flag. You notice that it has a vane on it to show the relative angle of the wind, and two sets of streamers. The upper set of streamers is surveyor's tape. The bottom streamer is like one of those little cheap plastic Hawaiian lays, whatever they call them. The idea is that the light streamers work effectively in light winds and the heavier streamer works more effectively in a medium wind. It's almost impossible to build a wind flag that'll work in all winds. You'll notice that there is another two flags further down range where you happen to be set up at 200 yards. I feel that 3 flags is the absolute minimum that someone should practice with. Obviously, during a match, there'll be a lot more that you can see. It's very critical that they be set up directly in line with the barrel and the target. This is not a problem on a steady crosswind or relative crosswinds. But when you start having wind switches and winds that come at you or directly behind you, it's critical that those flags are in line with the bullet's path so that you can tell, is that bullet going to be swung a little right or a little left. If you offset the flags and you have to shoot in a headwind or tailwind, it's harder to accurately judge what it's likely to do to the bullet. Now, one of the problems that most beginners have with wind flags is how high do you set them? The rule book is very specific. They should be no higher, no part of that flag should be any higher than the top of the bench to the bottom of the target. So you should not, if you sight along the top of the bench to the top of the target frame. Okay, here we go.
The short strokes.
I gotta, kind of hard to keep this thing in focus. Let me see if I can get this thing manually focused here. Okay. Now, if you look here, see the front flag, and then we're going to drop down to the edge of the bench. There's no flag above that line. That's what's important. Okay, if you don't get the flags too high, you'll be all right. Also, you'll have noticed other flags that have daisy wheels or spinners or propellers, stuff like that. It depends a lot on the wind conditions, where you're at, what type of flag to use. If you have relatively steady winds that vary slightly, then I feel the propellers are of a benefit. If you have winds that are varying quite a bit, I think the streamers are more effective gauges to the changes in the wind. Okay, now we're going to cover some rifle preparation when we're going to sit down here at the bench and prepare to start shooting. First thing's the old powder on the bags.
I put some powder on my old bag the other day and didn't talk to me for a week.
Alright, keep in mind that this rifle's got to slide consistently, smoothly. If it's dragging, that's no good. If it's flopping around, that's no good. A lot of that has to do with the way your powder is set up. Now, I like a forend to have about 2 or 3 inches of overhang on the front bag. Settle the rifle in the bags, work it back and forth some, kind of get everything settled in place. The next item I'm going to put on the rifle is a barrel heat shield. In this case, it attaches to the barrel. Some other models attach to the scope, but the whole point is that you've got to have something to keep the barrel heat out of the optical image that you're looking through. It's not really important if the wind is blowing any amount of all, but if you get some real light winds or some winds that are directly behind you or directly in front of you that real low velocity, that heat rising from the barrel can displace the target optically. Like I say, it's generally not critical except in real light air conditions. But it's a good idea to do it all the time. That way, if the wind suddenly dies on you, it's not going to bite you. A lot of guys use an old piece of target paper taped to the barrel, just so you get something on there. It can be worth as much as 1/4 of an inch if the air is really still and the air temperature is relatively cold. It becomes readily apparent if you happen to be shooting close to dusk or early at dawn where the light's not that good. You get some barrel heat that's getting into your optical image, you'll see the target image get darker and lighter. It's a dead giveaway that it's barrel heat that's bothering you. Next thing is we're going to prepare the barrel for shooting. This barrel's already broken in. We're going to start to cover a little bit here on cleaning process. Got a bore guide, make sure you always use a bore guide. A couple of cleaning rods here, one with a brush and one with a jag. You can get by with just one rod, but it's a lot more convenient to have two. This rod has a little bushing on it that fits the back of the bore guide, so it keeps the rod centered up in the bore guide. May not be all that critical, but it doesn't hurt anything. solvents here. One is sweets, that's for removing copper, and then I have the plain old hoppies as kind of a general cleaner. And I've got some stuff here called Break Free. It's a lubricant or an oil. Like I said, this barrel is already broke in, so it's been shot. So anytime I put a gun up, I always leave it soaking in the regular old hoppies because there's always some residual fouling that's in there. You want your patch to fit the jag fairly snugly inside the bore. There's no sense getting carried away with cleaning rod. You don't have to whip it around. Just smooth strokes. See, I got a little black on that patch. Powder fouling. Kind of let that soak for a little bit. We're going to go into sighting the scope, setting it up. The eyepiece should be adjusted so it's fairly clear in both the horizontal and vertical wires. And most of these Benchrest scopes have real fine wires in them, so it's kind of hard to get them completely sharp and focused, particularly if you have bad vision of any sort. I happen to have astigmatism on the rather severe side, so at best I have to compromise it. The other thing that's crucial is the front end of the scope, the parallax adjustment.
Goddamn weight.
You want to adjust that so that you can see the target clearly, and so that the crosshairs do not move around the target. The gun is completely steady, and you move your eye back and forth and up and down on the target. Because when you're actually shooting, you may not be thinking about keeping your eye exactly in the same place all the time in the back of the scope, so the parallax adjustment is critical. The other thing is when you get the parallax adjusted, if you're going to err a little bit, make sure you err on the short side. In other words, a lot of times you'll see, well, the target's not quite clear, so you adjust the parallax a little more, and the target gets a little clearer. You're actually focusing behind the target. If you move your eye down behind the scope, you'll see the crosshair tends to move the same direction as your eye. You're focused behind the target. That is a definite no-no. Ideally, you want the target nice and clear and the crosshairs not to move at all when you move your eye around. If you move your eye up and the crosshair goes down, that means you're focused in front of the target. So you need to adjust the lens a little further back. Screw the lens this way. You err a little where the parallax is completely out, but the target is not quite clear. That has a lot to do with the internal optics of the scope, and there's nothing you can really do about it. But sometimes I short focus my scope, particularly if the mirage is real light and real hard to read. If the mirage being the heat effects that you see in the air, changing the density of the air at the focal point of your scope, which is close to the target. The mirage occurs all the way from the front of the scope to the target, but the only place you can read it or see it is the distance that the scope is focused. And generally you have to have some sort of contrasting background to see it. This scope happens to be already set up at 200 yards. I was shooting it the other day. As far as sighting it in on your target knobs, I like to have it printing pretty much where I'm pointing it. In other words, the group will form exactly where the crosshairs intersect in a dead still condition. That way, if I'm shooting in switchy conditions and the wind dies suddenly and I don't have time for a side shot or something like that, I know where the gun should shoot, and based on my interpretation of the conditions, I can hold accordingly. But that's a kind of a last resort thing. You don't like to do that when you're shooting for groups. As far as where you want your group to form on the target, I generally like them to form at the bottom of the mothball. That way, if they happen to go a little high, they don't disappear in the black square. Let me get a target, show you what I'm talking about. Here's a target, and I like my groups to form at the bottom here. I generally will hold on one side of the mothball with the two crosshairs, rather than putting a specific point of the intersection. Tangent to this side and tangent to the bottom. That way, if I have to adjust my windage or something to hold for a shot, I can go a half a ring or a full ring or 2 rings or whatever I feel I need. You definitely don't want your groups forming up in this area. You have to be able to see your shots, where each shot went. Because every shot's a sighter. Shots that go on your record, though, all count. So if you see it leaking out of the group on your record, it's an indication that something is amiss. Just for the heck of it, I'm going to see if I can get this camera to set up behind the scope. Alright, I don't know how well this will show up on the TV. But you can definitely, I believe, see the mirage that we have today. Mirage is real important. It's your friend, it's your ally. You need to work with it. Anyhow, I just can't hold the camera steady enough behind this scope. It's very difficult. One thing that's important in rifle preparation is the application of grease on the right spots on the bolt. The lugs are very critical. Doesn't take a lot, just some. The next spot is the cocking ramp. Right there. I don't know how well you can see it, but the little angular ramp with the firing pin, the cocking piece rides on. The last part is what we call the extraction cam. It's the little angled area that contacts the back of the action, that when you open the bolt, it pulls the case out. So right there, it's most important. If you don't do this religiously every time you clean the rifle, sooner or later you'll gall things, and it makes everything hard to work. So make sure you do that. Alright, now we're going to assume that your gunsmith, when you bought your rifle, furnished you some brass. We'll also assume that it's brand new brass and needs to be fire formed. Hopefully they are already prepared the brass so that it can be fire formed in, that the necks are turned to the proper dimension, etc. But right now, since it's brand new, it doesn't really fit the chamber quite perfectly like we like to have them. There's 2 ways of fire forming. You can either fill it up with a relatively fast powder like 2400, a paper or cloth patch over in the neck, fire it out as a blank, or you can actually put a bullet in it and use a reduced load, something say 3,000 feet or less on these small Benchrest calibers, not particularly a hunter class cartridge, but the small calibers like the PPCs and the BRs and the 222s and such. You want to select a load that won't put the velocity over 3,000 with the normal bullet weights that we use, which are 52s in a 22 and 68s in a 6mm. So in this case, you need to have some sort of little hand priming tool so that you can feel the primers seat. You don't want to smash them, but you want to make sure they're firmly seated. And these little hand tools, either made by Lee or some of the custom ones, is what most people use. So we'll prime them all up here. Not really going to cover case preparation at this point. Right now we're just going to assume that you bought your rifle from a knowledgeable Benchrest shooter, and he's helped you by providing you some ready to go brass. The reason I'm not covering the case preparation at this time is I think it's a little more involved technically, and you can get yourself in some trouble with it. So we're going to leave that up to the experts at this point, or you should leave it up to the experts at this point. Of course, this is based on the assumption that you're shooting a Benchrest style chamber that has a small dimension in the neck where factory ammo or brass could not possibly fit in the first place. Important thing you need to do right off the bat is get you a little notebook just to write down notes on different things that you discover or want to keep track of. In this case, I know about what kind of powder charge this cartridge shoots at. So I'm going to drop that load down to an area that I know is below 3,000 for this initial firing. My particular powder measure is a very accurate, repeatable, has a numbered scale on it. It clicks. I can set it anywhere. I don't have to use a powder scale to set the load up with.
How about this service call?
Powders. If you're shooting a PPC, I don't see how you can go wrong with 322 type powder. If you're shooting a DR, 322 powder or 4895 powder seems to be pretty good. This particular cartridge is a reduced capacity BR and a 22. It's very similar to a 222 capacity. I'm shooting 4198 powder in it. Also some powder measure up here.
So I've got some made up here.
That was Felix fucked up a bed job.
We got someone going down.
His trigger was too far up in the... Hey, Jerry. I don't think I need one. I don't really.
What?
You got a phone call.
All right.
We're going to bed.
Yeah. That's what I did.
Okay. Now we've selected our powder charge here. And fill these all up. One of the things you need to learn is how to operate your powder measure consistently.
Shit, I can't get that.
The other thing you need to do is not double charge cases.
DR-20.
Got pro.
I started out, I was pretty good at first.
Oh well, everybody makes a mistake once in a while.
Ain't nobody. See the bullet in there. Let me look at it.
Okay, so pull it out and leave it
You guys ready?
land to do that.
Is it that
Yeah,
far
go
out?
ahead.
What you see that Sunday in?
Well, I just shot one, but seated in, barely touched it. Fuck, he looked like a...
By the way, get used to making mistakes in this game because you're going to make them all at least once or most of them. But you also need to watch other people's mistakes because you ain't going to live long enough to make all of them.
This side of the case just a little bit so I can see.
Anyhow,
On the outside.
tried to double charge that one. That won't work.
What do you think it'll pull it out?
what I get for talking while I'm trying to load, which is in your beginning stages. Probably ought to do this without any distractions. Now we're going to seat some bullets. Now, I'll tell you a little something about seating depth. You got to start out somewhere. I feel the best place to start out is with the bullet just touching the rifle. Not jammed, and not jumping, but just touching. The way you do that, you arbitrarily seat a bullet at a certain height, whatever looks good to you. And try it in a rifle. In other words, put it in the bolt, put it in the gun and close the bolt on it, and then pull it back out. What you need to do, though, first, take the dial calipers, and measure the overall length of the thing. Okay.
I got that one. I got 005.
Then take it, put it in the gun, close the bolt carefully, pull it back out, measure it again. If the dimension has not changed, you need to seat the bullet out further. If the bullet goes, the overall length goes smaller, then you need to set the seater so it seats the bullet a little deeper. And ideally, you want to set it up so that when you close the bolt, the overall length changes a few thousandths, somewhere between 1 and 5. And then that'll establish your starting seating depth. Anyhow, we'll go ahead and seat these bullets up. This seater die is already set up to seat the bullets at the proper distance for this particular barrel.
I'd give old Henry $20 if I didn't have to listen to all it.
I covered this thing, catch it.
You might learn something, you old coot. Don't mind these guys, these are just some fellow Benchrest shooters.
Well, the trouble is, I'm not sure which one.
One thing about Benchrest shooting, they're never going to let your ego get to you. They'll always find a way to humble you if you don't do it yourself first.
Let me see where you...
Anyhow, yes. Okay, we got these all loaded. The whole idea behind fire forming cases, though, is to get that load out to fit that chamber as close as possible. You don't want to blow them out too hard, though. Otherwise, if you overload it or something like that, you'll wreck the brass because it's relatively soft. It has to be shot at a couple of times to work harden it so that the primer pockets will stay tight. Generally, in these Benchrest rifles, we try to tune them up to where we're shooting on what is considered by most loading data standards to be extremely high pressure. Not unusual for people to shoot with cratering primers or flat primers or things of this nature, which are normal indications that the pressure is too high for safe reasons. But keep in mind that most of these Benchrest cartridges want to be shot on the high end of the pressure side, so it's a real touchy judgment call of what you're going to have to do. But in the fire forming process, you want to get the brass to expand out to fill the chamber properly, and that's the whole point of doing this. You may have to do it several times, particularly if your brass is very soft. That way it gives it a little work hardening. Stiff primers. Anyhow, we've got that done, so we're about ready to shoot the rifle. I want to talk to you a little bit about if you got a brand new barrel that hasn't been shot before, you need to break it in. And the way we break them in seems to help out as far as keeping the barrel shooting longer.
is we'll prep the barrel,
No, I held too
clean,
much.
and then we'll put a little lubricant of some sort, either hoppies or a light film of oil.
I thought it just quit with that kind
Shoot
of
one shot.
messing
Then we'll
around.
clean it again. Then we'll
Well, let's reload.
use the sweets,
4 left.
and the blue
I
coloring
got all mine. I
on the
didn't
patch will indicate how much copper fouling is in that barrel. And you'll notice as you shoot one shot and clean repeatedly that blue that's coming out of the barrel when you're cleaning with sweets gets less and less and less as the barrel breaks in. Most of these barrels that we shoot nowadays, it usually takes anywhere from about 3 shots to 10 shots to break them in, using this process of shooting a single shot, cleaning the barrel absolutely clean to where there's absolutely no fouling left in it, not getting any blue out of it or any black, and then preparing the barrel for the next firing by leaving the bore a slight film of either oil or lightweight, real lightweight type oil or hoppy, something of that nature. Because it's the first shot in a dry bore that puts down most of the fouling. So that leads us back to where we were a while ago on the rifle preparations. We've let this barrel soak down. Now we're gonna run a couple of patches of hoppies through it, and then a patch of break free, which is a real lightweight oil, and that provides the lubrication for the first shot. Then the subsequent shots that we fire after that are lubricated by the powder residue that's left in the
So
barrel.
Roger's supposed to be out here this morning, huh?
Yeah.
So with that, we'll
We'll have
stop
our
for
first
that.
outlaw match tomorrow. You're welcome.
The process of leaving the bore wet with some sort of lubricant generally affect that first shot placement slightly. Normally you wouldn't want to throw a shot on a piece of paper that you intended to shoot a group on. You want to dump that shot somewhere else, on a cider target or something of that nature. There's the bore guide here. The next step is something to keep in mind. Keep a little lighter fluid or kind of solvent to work that trigger out, because the triggers will get grease and dirt, powder residue, whatever junk will find its way in there. Just dump a little in there and work that trigger a couple of times, pressing down on the sear and pulling the trigger. Make sure everything works freely. Could screw up during a match sometimes, so it's a good habit to get into. Some people argue it needs to be done every cleaning. I don't feel that way, but whatever you feel like, just so long as you do it periodically. Next thing is we got to have something to wipe the residue out of the chamber. I use what they call a 30 caliber mop on a little rod here and a patch. Shove it up into the chamber and spin it around a couple times. Clean up any residue that's left in the chamber. Pull the old patch out. Our rifle's all ready to go. It's clean. The barrel is lubricated for that first shot. I like to work the bolt back and forth a couple times. Try the trigger, make sure everything's working all right. Yeah, that's something you can't really do in a match until they tell you, but when you're shooting by yourself, it doesn't hurt nothing. I'm just going to shoot these, fire form these cases. This barrel's already broke in, so I'm going to shoot all 20 rounds. If it were a new barrel, this is an ideal time to go ahead and shoot one shot clean, shoot one shot clean, shoot one shot clean while you're fire forming those 20 cases. And let's say you, after you got, say, 6 shots through there and there was no more fouling when you were cleaning it, well, then you shoot 2 shots and clean. If there's no more fouling, then shoot 3 shots and clean. If there's no more fouling, shoot 5 shots and clean. Whatever it takes. And then, at the end, I wouldn't shoot any more than 10 in a row on a new barrel until it's, after I've got about 20 shots through it. And after I've got the 20 through it, then it's broke in as much as it's going to break in, and you might as well go for it there.
Let me move it.
On cleaning in general, I would try not to shoot over a loading block or 20 shots without cleaning unless it was some emergency. Particularly if you're just goofing around. 20 shots is plenty on these stainless barrels between cleanings. You're trying to keep the accuracy life as long as possible, so there's no sense shooting 50 or 60 rounds through it before cleaning, because that's not the way you'll shoot it in a match in the first place. Most of the times in a match you're not going to shoot more than 20 rounds, so kind of keep in mind that the things you do in practice and stuff ought to be similar to the way you do them in a batch. I'll shoot a few of these shots. I set my hand there so it stays this hand.
Show, man.
All set up, and I'm just going to fire form these, so I really don't care where they go. This is a heavy varmint, so it can be shot on almost any technique. Alright, well, we got all those cases fire formed, so we'll clean the rifle. Now, this barrel will be good and dirty because I shot a reduced load, which is going to be plenty black. A lot of powder residue. Generally, when the loads go up and the pressure gets up there, your powder burns better. First thing I do is take a brush, put some regular old hoppies on it.
Yeah, I didn't see anything make that.
And I'll run it about
Is it right?
2 or 3
I
cycles.
see with that dead condition is what I see.
Sometimes
I know.
4 or 5. In this case, I'm going to use 4 or 5 because
right straight in that other
there's
house.
a lot of powder residue in there.
Hard to figure this shit out. I know it couldn't have been me.
You get it figured out, will you let me know?
Keep your cleaner rods relatively clean
I think we're all
because they'll pick up grit and dirt on their own just hanging out there. So I keep a rag with
Going
me.
down range, Wayne.
Marley, you gonna go put your targets up?
Nah.
Anyhow,
We got enough?
after I've done that, I'll start running a couple of patches of poppies. Push all that goop out.
Don't do that. Scared you. What? Hey, we want to go down range.
Oh, they wanted to go. I didn't want to go.
I'll go.
All that brush really does is loosen up everything, and brushing it more than a few strokes really doesn't do any good.
That's probably the lowest one you've ever seen in one of these
So I
things.
don't think it would hurt any to cut down the amount of that. And I'll run a few patches of hoppies,
Did you fix
get most of the black stuff out.
Dodge up in one? Yeah, he needs one bad. Yeah, he's got this too thick in here. See, mine was way up, and that's when I straightened that one out. To get it mixed in a little down. Then And I read that. I took it
After I get a couple of patches of poppies through, then I start running the sweets.
It worked fine.
And when you start shooting high pressure loads, you'll see the blue fouling from the jacket material of the bullet. The sweets generally does most of its work in the first few minutes, so letting one soak for a long time really does no good. So now we'll go, we've got our fire form cases, so we'll load up a few of them and start doing a little tuning up.
He ain't one to face it. He got 2 big food.
Okay, as we said a little while ago, now we're going to get into tuning up the gun. First off, I feel it's a total waste of time to try and tune a rifle up to anything other than 200 yards. You tune one of these Benchrest rifles up at 100 yards, they'll fool you. They shoot too good at 100 yards. You really need to make it work at 200 to start off. 3 basic powders that are used in Benchrest, primarily the 322 or one of its variations is by far the most popular. 4895 has some popularity, particularly with hunter class shooters. And then those that shoot the small cases like 6x47s and 222s and stuff, 4198 is a good powder. Those are the 3 powders you should try and make things work with. If you can't get them to work with one of those 3, you're probably got some other sort of problems. I can't overemphasize the importance of making the rifle work at 200 yards first. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to shoot a few groups, just let the camera roll, and hopefully you can see it through this setup I've got here on this other scope. And conditions look reasonably steady, so hopefully maybe we'll get 1 or 2 good ones out of there. But I'm going to start out at a light load and work my way up.
Got yours on, Pat?
Yeah.
Okay, that load we shot over the chronograph and produced some pretty good numbers.
Well, I'm going to feel real bad today, kicking your ass with my
It's about a 1/2 inch wide and about a 1/2 inch tall.
Have him talking to himself, I can feel it in the scene.
But the velocity is around 32.45, which is somewhat low for this particular cartridge. But we've gone up 3/10 of a grain, and we're gonna try this other load. We'll shoot at the target above the one we just shot. Change my hold a little bit, aim it in a different spot.
Close to you being through.
Well, that load actually shot a little worse. It doesn't have, well, it was quite as much horizontal, but it's got about 3/4 of an inch of vertical in it. The velocity came up about 50 feet per second. We're up around 3,300. So we're going to go up another 3/10 of a grain. 2 more steps of that. And it's one of those should probably shoot.
Go in one hole?
Damn near, I got 4 of them in one hole and one touching.
Okay, that load there is about 6/10, 7/10 of an inch wide, but the vertical has come out of it quite a bit. We've got about 3/10 of vertical in it. So that's starting to show a little promise there. And we'll try one more here, going up 3 more tenths.
Well, these are a lot longer than the other one.
Well, that group there looks like about the best of the lot. It really has about the same amount of vertical in it as the group before, but it tightened up quite a bit on the horizontal there. That's about a 4/10, maybe 4 to 5/10 of an inch group at 200, but you can see that the bullets are trying to wad up there pretty good, and that's what we're looking for. So now we've got a powder charge, we're going to play around with a little seating depth. We're going to set remember we started out with the bullets touching. We're going to try a group with the bullets jammed in there about 5 more thousandths, and we're going to try jumping them 5 thousandths and try jumping them 10. See if anything happens. Okay, I've selected a load that is halfway between those last 2 groups that we shot, and we're going to play with the seating depth now. And I guess you can see that the conditions have worsened slightly, and I guess you can't see the wind flags on the camera here, but wind has picked up somewhat in velocity, though the angular direction hasn't really changed much. So the groups might get a little wider here, but what we're looking for is the tendency for the rifle to follow the condition properly, and bullets are going to wad up. But the first one we're going to try is jamming the bullets hard into the lands, about 5 more thousandths. Well, those 4 shots looked pretty good, but we lost one. But it looks like we jammed that bullet a little and it seemed to help. Now we're going to go the other way and jump it and see if things get worse. Okay, this next group, we're jumping a bullet instead of jamming it, and we'll see how that goes.
looks a lot better. We've got about a 1/4 inch of vertical, and that group is probably less than 3/8 of an inch horizontal. So it looks like this rifle likes to have that bullet jump a little bit. But we'll just go ahead and make it jump a little further and see what happens. We'll see. Okay, well, we're gonna try a little more jump on the bullet and see what happens. Well, readily apparent that things went all to hell there. We didn't really pick up a whole lot of vertical in there, but the bullet was really swinging wild left and right. So it looks like this bullet wanted a little bit of jump, but not too much. Anyhow, you can go back and forth playing with powder and loads until you get things really tweaked out, but conditions aren't that great today. We've got a pretty strong crosswind here. It's probably varying between, I'll say 2 or 3 mile an hour and maybe as much as 10 mile an hour or so. And that can get a little tough to read. Ideally, you want to do your tuning up early in the morning when the wind is down and the mirage hasn't really built up. And once you think you got things working pretty good, shoot five groups in a row at that same load and see what kind of aggregate number you get, you know, the average of those 5 groups. And if the groups seem to be relatively close to each other in overall size, you probably got something working pretty good there. One thing I want to mention about primers, most of us shoot the Federal primers. If you happen to be shooting a 222 or Deuce Mag or 6x47 or any of those long skinny cartridges, you're probably going to do better with the Remington primers. But other than that, most of the others like the Federals. And I think what we'll do now is we'll move to 100 yards and we'll show you what we do now that we've established a 200 yard load. We're going to check it at 100 yards, and we'll probably have to make a slight decrease in powder charge in order to make the gun shoot best at 100 yards. Alright, we're set up at 100 yards now, and we're going to shoot a few groups at 100. We're going to start out with the load that we thought was working pretty good at 200. And we'll shoot a group with it, and then we'll gradually lower that load about 2/10 of a grain each step and see what happens. In case you're wondering where this first shot's going, I'm dumping it off because I'm using it to follow a clean barrel, but then the rest of these I'll just go ahead and shoot.
initials, BD.
Well, that's not bad. 2 shots through the same hole. Let's see where the other 3 go. Right now, that's about a 1/10 inch group.
Right target. Bullseye. Right there. I think.
That's not bad. That's pretty good. This rifle may just want to shoot the same load at 100 and 200. Every once in a while you find that, particularly with the 22 calibers. The 6mm, though, I've found usually want to shoot a load that's a little bit lighter at 100. But we're going to go ahead and continue with the program here, and we'll go ahead and drop the load a couple of times and see what happens.
What target?
Okay, now we've dropped the load a little bit, and we'll see how it shoots.
How you doing today?
I don't know yet. Saving that one?
Over there on that left.
Well, you can't see the flags, but the wind let up a little, so might be a little trickier to shoot here.
But we're learning. Man, you've come a long way. Did you let some plastic termites loose on that stop?
Yeah.
They ate a hole in that sucker.
What's that?
They ate a hole in that sucker.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I like that hole though.
That was Jerry loved it for a long time.
Yeah.
$8 years, 7 years.
Well, you go back to the loading room and get you some of that. Yeah.
Well, that load looks a little worse, but it had a tendency. Well, unfortunately, I forgot to turn the camera on when I shot that group there. But anyhow, we had dropped the load a little bit more, and that group shot a lot flatter. We've got fairly good varying wind now from side to side, but I believe that was an improvement there. We're approximately 3/10 of a grain less than the 200-yard load at this point. We're going to drop it a little bit more, and we should see it open up vertically, I would think, on this next firing. Alrighty, we'll remember to turn the camera on this time, and we'll see what this group does. Kind of wait for the wind to die down here. It's considerably in the velocity, and also the angle's picked up. There, it's coming back now. Same hole. little vertical in it. About kind of what I expected. Yeah, now I get a switch. Well, I don't know. That's got a little up and down in it again. But nonetheless, you can see the changes in the groups as you change the load. And like I said, it's very difficult to determine loads at 100 yards because they all generally shoot pretty good. That's why it's so important to make things work at 200 yards.
I missed 2 minutes. Huh? 49 seconds.
I don't play with seating depths at 100 yards. I do all my tuning at 200 and then kind of check things out at 100. Generally what I'll do at 100, I'll try to catch some good conditions and see how the groups form up, how they develop, and after I think I've got something that I like, then I'll shoot some aggregates with it.
Well, I got a 49
And if I feel I need to go up a little bit or down a little bit, I'll shoot another ag. See which. You really can't tell anything unless you're shooting aggregates at 100 yards. Okay, we're going to talk a little about shooting style, and what I mean by shooting style is the way you handle the gun while you're shooting it. A heavy varmint is generally forgiving in the way it's handled compared to the 10.5 pound guns. So a heavy varmint should shoot equally well whether you've got some light touch on it or if you're just shooting it totally free recoil. Right now the gun's configured as a heavy varmint, and watch my right hand in particular. I don't know how well you can see my shoulder, but I try not to touch the stock with my cheek or my headphones or my shoulder, only my trigger finger in a heavy varmint configuration. You need to try both the free recoil method as well as putting a little touch on the gun, either a little light shoulder pressure or light thumb pressure, and see how it handles. A lot of this is determined by the balance of the weight of the gun and the stock configuration. And I'll show you a little here. Okay, nothing's touching the gun. The only thing that's going to touch this gun is this finger right here, the trigger finger. Just right there. And we'll shoot a group with it this way. Well, we shot a pretty big group there. It's about almost a ½ an inch in a diagonal manner, due primarily to the changing wind conditions. I want to show you what I mean by putting a little touch on the gun. In this manner, I'm going to rest this thumb here on the top of the stock in the rear of the action area. That little group was a little better. Wind was a little better there. It's about a 3/10 inch group. The gun basically shoots the same because of the weight of the gun, that whether you put a little touch on it or not.
What kind of 30 caliber bullet?
Now, if you're shooting a 10.5 pound or a 10 pound gun, I highly recommend you experiment with either a little slight shoulder pressure or slight thumb pressure on the stock. Very slight on that thumb pressure.
68.
But try to keep it real consistent. But I feel that particularly the lighter guns
We got some
want to be shot,
125
will
GTB
shoot their best with a little
You got it.
light touch on them. The heavy varmint class, it doesn't seem to much matter.
Here's some more. Here's 150.
Okay, give you an idea what kind of conditions we're shooting in today. I'm just going to let the camera run here for a while. You can see my flags directly in line, and then there's some other fellas that are playing around out here today on either side of me. You just kind of watch the flags for a while, and I'll show you some groups shot in the varying conditions. And I'm going to bring the targets back up here. Watch your ears.
self-gratification deal there. You shoot, you hear it go blink.
Got that sucker. Number of factors that you need to watch when you're shooting what we call conditions. One important factor is, of course, the mirage that's visible at the target. You need to keep an eye out on that. Quite reliable compared to the wind flags. Another factor that you need to keep an eye out for is how does the wind feel on your skin? In other words, if it suddenly feels cooler, the wind's picked up. If you suddenly notice the wind has died on your face or your skin, whatever, then you know the conditions let up. Both of those are often overlooked by a beginning shooter, but they are important factors that you need to keep an eye on. I don't think a person can have too many wind flags, but you can darn sure have too few. I think a minimum of 3 should be in use any time you're shooting your gun, whether it's practice or tuning up or shooting in a match. 6 starting to get a little cumbersome, but I like to shoot with about 6 flags myself, particularly at 100 yards. 100 yards, 3 is plenty adequate. 4 is a little better. Any more than that, you start getting too much stuff to watch. But you'll notice that the flags here are switching around from a dead headwind coming straight at us to one that's quartering, running from right to left. Most of the time you don't want to shoot in a headwind or something like that. You don't want to shoot when your flags are confused. In other words, one flag's going to the right, one flag's going to the left, and one doesn't know where he's going. Try to get most of your flags running the same direction like you see right now. And that should be a easier condition to shoot in. Watch your velocity changes as the flags become more of a crosswind. Velocity changes when the wind is a crosswind will really have a dramatic effect. Slight angular changes when it's in a crosswind situation don't have much of an effect. On the headwind, you have to watch both the angular changes and the velocity changes. So headwinds and tailwinds can be extremely tricky. But sometimes conditions are so violent that the flags don't even sit still for a second. Then sometimes it's worthwhile to try shooting a headwind or tailwind and just kind of catch your shots, time them as the flags move across through the straight on or straight away condition. These are things that you'll have to play with, and as your experience grows, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's a pretty good pickup on the wind. Ideally, you want to try to get all 5 shots downrange in the same basic wind condition. If the wind changes substantially, you better let it come back and settle down into that what appears to be the same condition. If you're shooting in a match, obviously you want to check it on a sighter target. If you just practice it or tuning up, you can just see where the various wind changes displace the bullets. But you have to have your gun tuned up properly to begin with, otherwise you may see a bullet going the opposite way that you thought it should go. thing I want to talk about is practice. Okay, you've got your gun tuned up, and let's say you can shoot some reasonable small groups, say in the 3/10 range at 100 yards, 3 to 4/10 range at 100 yards, and say 3/4 of an inch to 1 1/4 at 200. What you need to do now is probably start shooting on regulation type targets, using the bottom half of the target paper for the sighter and the top half for the record. Get you a little timer or something like that if you want to try and actually shoot it in a 7-minute match format. Otherwise, you don't have to really time it. Just go ahead and try to shoot some good record groups in the conditions that you happen to have that day. Don't wait for particularly good days. Don't shoot on particularly nasty days. Just kind of shoot average day weather conditions, because that's what most of your matches are going to be in anyhow. But when you practice, use the sighter target. Check out how much that gets blown around by the wind. And when you go to the record, try your best. Be patient. I can't overemphasize the patience portion of this thing. Too many lost shots are due to patience, being impatient or lazy, whatever. Shoot five targets. Take about 50 rounds with you to the range or so. Enough equipment for 50 shots. Go out and shoot a 100-yard aggregate or a 200-yard aggregate. Shoot a 5-shot group on a target using the sighter, and change the target out while you're cleaning the gun and reloading your cases. Shoot 5 targets, 5-shot groups, and keep track of your aggregate as you start out, and it's the best practice. And once you get to the point where you feel that you've shown some improvement and some consistency, then start shooting alongside some other Benchrest shooters, because a lot of times conditions may be such that your aggregate number is not that good, but yet if you happen to be shooting along some of your fellow shooters, maybe you did a little better than they did, or maybe you did worse. This way you can really measure how things are progressing for yourself. Now, in practice, I would say you just want to shoot at the club level in club matches. I say you need to shoot about 1,000 to 2,000 rounds a year. If you want to be competitive in the registered shoots, I think you need to shoot in the area of 3,000 to 5,000 rounds a year. If you really want to hot dog it, I think you need to go for 5,000 to 10,000 rounds a year minimum, and several barrels, etc. But that's later on, if you're into the heavy competitions at the nationals and the super shoots and things like that. Make sure you bring all your equipment when you come to practice. Wind flags, in particular, I see a lot of guys try to practice and tune up without using wind flags. It's a total waste of time. Got to have some idea what that wind is doing out there. Anytime you're out there practicing, you got to have wind flags. Practice and tune it up.
Shame about that last shot, man.
Okay, as you can see here, the 4 groups that we shot earlier when we were changing loads to show the differences in the loads. And the 2 groups on the bottom in the middle here are shot during the conditions that where the wind was varying a lot, and what I was doing there is I was just holding the gun in the same place all the time and just pulling the trigger and letting the bullets go wherever they wanted to. And as you can see, those groups are substantially larger than the other ones, whereas the other groups were held using my best judgment as to where to hold for each shot in the varying wind conditions. All these groups were shot in the same winds basically, but to give you an idea how much the condition was really changing, I'll show you some other groups some other people have been shooting today. Right here give you an idea how things are working for that fella and for this fella here. So as you can see, there is a fair amount of wind there that we're playing with today, and you kind of have to recognize things as whether they're working or not. That will come with experience. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is going to your first match. And let's say it's probably some little local club match. First thing you do when you get there, you got to sign up to participate in the match, so you'll have to ask around and find out who it is you've got to talk to. Pay your money, and then the next thing is pick you out a spot to put your equipment so you can load and clean your rifle. And you need to find out what their procedure is about the bench assignments. Sometimes they draw for benches, sometimes you just pick out whatever bench you want to shoot off of, and then that's where you want to put your rests and stuff. You may have to share that bench with another shooter, so when you're done shooting in each individual match, you know, either move your equipment to the opposite side of the bench that you're using if the fella happens to be right-handed and you're right-handed. If he's left-handed, you know, work something out with the other shooters. Be courteous to him. The way a match runs, they give you 7 minutes to put your 5 shots on your record target, and they'll give you some commands at the beginning of each match, and they'll say something like ready on the right, ready on the left, all ready on the firing line. Place bolts and rifles, commence fire, and then your time starts. And don't be in a hurry. 7 minutes is plenty of time to get 7 shots off. Try to pick what looks like a consistent condition. Particularly a beginning Benchrest shooter will have trouble reading the conditions and stuff. But you need to get your feet wet. Go ahead and get in the match. Don't worry about doing good, bad, or in the middle. Go out there and have a ball. If you take this stuff too seriously your first couple of years, chances are you'll quit. So, you know, have fun with it. Don't think that you know, well, shoot, I shot 1/4-inch groups in practice the other day, why can't I do it today in a match? Well, that's kind of the way things go. So anyhow, I brought a target here. This is a 100-yard target for group shooting. A 200-yard target looks similar, except they're about twice as big, same size piece of paper. Don't shoot above this line, because if you do, it counts on your record. Make sure all of your 5 shots are inside of this border right here. If you're starting out and you're shooting your sighter here, if your bullets are hitting around this black square, you need to adjust your scope so that the bullets won't hit around there, assuming you're aiming around the center or the mothball of the target. When you look at the target through your scope, assuming you're using a fairly powerful scope, the only number you can really read is this big number right here. That's your competitor number. And you need to find out what your competitor number is. It's a number assigned to you, and it's primarily used for keeping the statistics and records of the match. So that's the important number. If you line your gun up on your target and that number ain't your number, don't pull the trigger. You're lined up on the wrong target. Also, the benches are numbered, and usually the target frame has a number. In other words, there might be a number up here or a number down below here, identifying that area of the target holder as corresponding to that particular bench. So don't get the two numbers confused. If you're on bench 15, your competitor number 10
there may be a number up here that says 15, or down here it says 15. Okay, you're in the right spot. If you are competitor 10 and you're supposed to be on bench 15 and you're on bench 10, you're on the wrong bench. Okay? So, when you set your equipment up, first thing you do, make sure you're on the right bench. Then after you get your rifle set up, set it up at the target frame area that corresponds to the bench you're on. Then go out and set your flags. They'll give you about 15 minutes, half an hour, something like that, to set your flags up before the matches get underway. So, if there's another shooter on your bench with you, the two of you can help each other out doing this. That way you don't have to walk back and forth, adjusting your flags. Also, before you go to the match, make sure that you do kind of a little pre-check the evening before, that you've got all of your equipment. You got it all together in one small area, so that when you go out in the morning, it may be 5, 6 o'clock in the morning or something like this, depending on how far you've got to drive. You may not be quite awake, and you might leave your wind flags or your little chair to sit on, or something that's relatively important. I've heard tell stories of people that have driven halfway across the country and forgot the bolt for their rifle. So kind of go through everything, particularly your first matches. After a while, you kind of get into a routine schedule, so to speak, preparing for a match, and that'll come fairly easy. But anyhow, they may have more than one relay. In other words, let's say they had 10 benches to use, but they had 12 shooters. Well, they'd have to have a second relay. So you need to find out which relay you're on if they have more than one. And they'll call you to the line. They'll say, okay, relay 1 shooters to the line. Okay, or relay 2 shooters to the line. And in a lot of cases, they'll announce which particular match it is. Match 1, match 2, match 3, match 4, match 5, whatever it may be. A lot of clubs will shoot a hunter class in the morning and a group shoot type, what we call heavy varmint, in the afternoon, or vice versa. So you need to find that out before you go. If you're shooting both classes, well, then it doesn't really matter. But if you only shoot one class, you may not want to show up real early in the morning if your class doesn't start till noon. Take clothing that's appropriate for the time of year. You need to be comfortable when you're doing this. If you're sitting there shivering or soaking wet, you're probably not going to do very good. So make sure you take appropriate clothing. Sometimes these weathermen ain't very good, so you need to be comfortable when you're doing this. So a little pre-planning there. Make sure you take plenty of powder, primers, bullets. A lot of times you can borrow other stuff from the other shooters. Most people are fairly cordial and fairly helpful if you get in a little trouble there. If you have any questions, particularly your first match, ask them. Don't be afraid to ask somebody. Most people in this sport are more than willing to help out a new shooter. And at the first chance you get, go to a match, be it a registered match or just a little club shoot. As soon as you can, and either get your feet wet or you'll talk to the people. You'll learn a lot socializing with these other Benchrest shooters. But anyhow, they'll have a little break between each match. The match runs 7 minutes. It takes them approximately 5 to 10 minutes to change out the targets for the next match or relay. And you generally have about 20 minutes to a half an hour or so before you go up to the line again. Now, if you had a big match such as the Nationals or one of the named shoots, a lot of times they'll have 3, 4, 5 relays. So it may be an hour or so before you get called back up to the line. So when you go something like that, and I don't discourage you even in your first year of participating in a nationals or a large match if the opportunity presents itself. A lot of good experience, a lot of very knowledgeable people in this sport that have been in the sport for many years, and you can really pick up a lot in a couple of days at one of those big matches. So don't hesitate. You never know, you might get lucky and win something. Not likely, but you know, it's happened before. I've seen a guy that walked up to the bench with a Remington 40X and a wood stock 222 and a big old long old-fashioned scope. He didn't shoot very well in the aggregate, but he happened to shoot the small group of the day at that particular yardage. So you know, you never know. Things happen, good and bad. So you know, if you get an opportunity to go to a big match, by all means attend it. Don't be bashful. No one's going to put you down. No one's going to score and, you know, say, oh, look at this joker, you know. Don't worry about that. That's pretty much how it goes. Particularly club matches are relatively informal. They may deviate from the rules or procedures slightly, but turn that light back on. Okay, show you a little bit on how to turn your case necks so that they'll fit in your gun. First diagram here this is the inside of your chamber. This area is the neck where the brass is and the bullet's going to be. Okay, this neck diameter here happens to be .261, 261 thousandths is this dimension here. So the loaded round, that's with the brass and the bullet, has to measure something less than 261. Get yourself a little micrometer so that you can check that the finished loaded round is smaller than the dimension of your neck on your gun. If you don't know what that dimension is, ask the man who built the gun, or it should be wrote on the barrel. Okay, in this case it's a 6 millimeter. The bullet diameter that we happen to be using is .2433. Okay, this body is 243.0, but back here at the base of the bullet it's a little bit larger. Okay, so you have to take that into account. You'll have to measure again with your micrometer that has to be able to read to 10 thousandths what the diameter of the bullet is that you're using. And be real careful when you're measuring 10 thousandths, because it doesn't take much to deform the bullet so you get a bad reading. So we're going to take the neck dimension, subtract the dimension of the bullet, and that leaves us approximately 18 thousandths of total clearance. That's the amount left for the brass and whatever clearance we want. So since the brass is on both sides of the bullet, we got to divide that number by 2. So we end up with a neck wall that has to be something less than 9 thousandths of an inch. Typically it's around 8 thousandths is what we cut them for in this particular instance. A little tubing mic is what you need to measure the brass with. And here a factory round for a 6BR measures 12 thousandths. So we've got to cut approximately 4 thousandths off of it. You can buy yourself one of these little neck turning tools and you can adjust the depth of the cut. But keep in mind, the whole point of this is so that we don't have an interference fit. In other words, we make the brass and the bullet and everything too tight. That's the important thing. Okay, the final thing is when you adjust your depth of the cut on the neck, you want to just blend it in to the shoulder area so that this cutter goes just about almost to the start of the shoulder. You got to be careful that you don't cut too deep, or you end up having a real thin spot in brass there, and it will fail. If you cut too far away from the junction of the neck and the shoulder, then you get a little donut that causes problems. I got a blinking light on the camera here. I don't know what's going on, but anyhow, I hope all this information helps you get started out. And like I said, my name is Jerry Hensler. And if you've got any questions or something, feel you want to give me a call, no problem. My number is 512-690-7491. And you just have to kind of catch me when you can. But I'll be coming out with a second one of these tapes probably in 6 months to a year. It'll be aimed more at the person that's had a year or two of experience and is in particularly interested in competing at more than the club level. If you have any comments or suggestions, give me a call. I'll be glad to hear from you. Thank you.